7 former U.S. defense secretaries, including 2 who served under former President Trump, James Mattis and Mark Esper, disagree with you. And they signed a letter to Senate leaders saying that your actions are harming military readiness, that this risks damaging U.S. national security, and it risks turning military officers into political pawns. And they specifically say that there are some pretty important positions that you were holding up, including the 5th Fleet in Bahrain and the 7th Fleet in the Pacific, which are critical to checking Iranian and Chinese aggression. Are you saying that you know better than those 7 former defense secretaries?
Well, first of all, those Secretary of Defenses were nominees. They weren't elected. I was elected to represent the people of Alabama in this country. Number 2, if they want to confirm a general or admiral, we can do it tomorrow, okay? I'm not stopping all of them. I mean, if there's some that they want out there, General Brown, who's going to be the new head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, he'll go through by himself. He's going to go through confirmation tomorrow, and we will vote on him by himself. He will not be held up. And so this is just throwing 100 or 200 in there and doing it at one time when I'm just saying, hey, this gives me the right, because I'm a senator, I can hold any confirmation I want until we get some kind of confirmation of why you're doing this. Get conversation. Let's talk. I've heard 0 from the White House and 0 the last 5 months, other than 10 minutes from Secretary Austin in February.
Senator Tommy Tuberville is holding the United States military hostage. That's right. One senator, one single freshman senator, is on the verge of putting the national security of the entire country at extreme risk. That's right. This can't be overstated. Did you know? You! Yes, I'm talking to you, the person watching this video. Did you know that the United States at present does not have an officer who is officially in charge of the Army, Navy, or Marine Corps? Yes, that's right. The Army, Navy, and Marine Corps do not officially have anyone that is running those organizations. Let me reiterate. The United States now has the second biggest Navy in the world, behind the Chinese. And in a time where we are no longer the largest sea power in the world, we have no one officially running the United States Navy. And that's all thanks to freshman Senator Tommy Tuberville. Let me explain. The senator is responsible for the approval of all commissioned officers in the United States military. Simply put, the branch recommends a promotion. The executive branch vets it and puts it forward to the Senate, and the Senate approves it. The process is simple enough. Generally, senators get to know officers as they climb the ranks of the military very well, because they have to often appear before the Senate, both in public forums and in closed forums. Closed because of the sensitivity of the issues being discussed. As a result, senators have an ongoing and trusted relationship with the military, and in a rare act of senatorial humility, the Senate tends to show great deference to the military. After all, this is an institution filled with men and women across the country that every single day fight, bleed, and die to protect this country, so that we, civilians, can be civilized, so that we can live in peace, free from fears of war and invasion. So the Senate tends to practice a watchful yet respectful and deferential hands-off policy when it comes to the appointment of high-ranking military officers, as these officers have been vetted upon each promotion, and many of them are combat veterans, which means they have killed others or attempted to kill others for America and Americans. The Senate tends to allow these men and women to choose their own leaders with their own hands as long as the president approves of them and they pass another round of vetting by the senatorial staff. This is one of the very few bipartisan practices followed by all branches of government, regardless of which party is in charge of the presidency or the Senate. Because there are so many officers or offices to be filled in the military on a regular basis, and because of this ongoing and highly respectful relationship between all the institutions involved, the Senate usually approves of all the officers by what is called unanimous consent. All officers who the Senate does not approve of are weeded out very quietly, simply by sending a message to the White House, and the nominee is quietly removed before the nominee slate is finalized. Then the vote is taken by unanimous consent. This type of voting is used for run-of-the-mill matters. It would be as if your family had to vote every week on whether to buy groceries. This would be a time-consuming and very annoying process. So one day your wife or daughter would probably say, "Hey, can't we just all agree to buy groceries unless someone has a problem with it?" A sort of automatic yes unless someone says no? Well, that's unanimous consent. Everyone says yes unless someone says no. Well, Tommy Tuberville is saying no.
So let me just say this one more time, because I keep getting asked the same question over and over again. I will keep my hold. I will keep it on until the Pentagon follows the law or changes the law. It's that simple.
Why? He is saying that the Pentagon's current policy on abortion is against the law. Let me explain. The Pentagon is funded by federal dollars, and there is an amendment called the Hyde Amendment that prohibits federal dollars from being spent covering the cost of abortions, except in the cases of rape, incest, or to save the life of the mother. And the Pentagon does abide by that specific language. The Pentagon does not cover the cost of abortions now, nor has it done so in the past. However, since the overturning of Roe v. Wade, the Pentagon has said that it will cover for all military personnel travel costs to any state in the United States so that any woman in the U.S. military can receive medical care specific to women. This includes plane fees and paid time off for recovery. Tuberville says this violates the Hyde Amendment, and as a result, he won't budge. He won't approve of the slate of 300, yes, 300 nominees for high-ranking offices in the military until a military reverses its stance on abortion. Now, needless to say, this is an institution that has embedded in every fiber of his being an existential aversion to surrender. Aside from their aversion to surrender, their logic's simple. First, they check with the Department of Justice. According to the DOJ, paying for travel and medical leave, but not abortion, itself is in line with the U.S. law as it stands. But their argument goes much deeper than that. Their thought process is simple. The military must be cohesive. You cannot have one standard of care for a soldier in Fort Dix in New York and another soldier at Fort Bragg in North Carolina. The U.S. military can't be subject to this patchwork quilt of laws that affect healthcare and productive rights state to state. Therefore, the U.S. military must offer one cohesive healthcare system. And since abortion is still legal in the United States, all soldiers must have access to it. It can't rely on where you're based. And as a practical matter, soldiers can't afford to pay for their own travel. A private first class in the United States Army makes about $30,000 a year after 8 years of experience. Even if that private wanted to pay for their own travel, they most likely couldn't, as their pay is too low. This would lead to a perverse two-tier system where commissioned officers who can afford flights and travel could practice reproductive health, while enlisted soldiers would be forced through financial constraints to carry every pregnancy to term. What could be possibly worse for unit cohesion and morale? Furthermore, the U.S. military does not answer to a single senator. It doesn't even answer to the leaders of the Senate, Mitch McConnell or Chuck Schumer. Rather, the military, though they respect the Senate and the senatorial leaders, only answer to the President of the United States according to the Constitution. Therefore, listening to Senator Tuberville over their commander-in-chief, the President of the United States, would be a violation of their chain of command. They can't listen, even if they wanted to. But Senator Tuberville isn't budging, and it's leading to both political and real-world damage. Politically speaking, Republicans are running for cover. Tuberville is on his own, literally. Not one Republican is publicly, and from the research I've done, even privately supporting him. Senator Roger Wicker, a Republican from Mississippi, and the Deep South doesn't get deeper than Mississippi, said that he had not seen Tuberville, and I quote, in several weeks, and added, I hope we can get this issue resolved. Now understand this. The Senate is 100 people with an average age of 64. Republicans are half the Senate, which means there are 50 of them. That's 2 classrooms full of people. If you haven't seen someone in several weeks in the U.S. Senate, it's because you don't want to see them. Senator John Thune of South Dakota and the number 2 Republican in the Senate, widely believed to be in the running to replace Mitch McConnell upon his retirement, said, I'm not sure what ultimately happens with those holds. He went on to say, I'm hoping they can figure something out, a solution. Obviously, we want to get a lot of those military leaders confirmed. Lindsey Graham, the senator from South Carolina, went on to say this.
I agree with Senator Tuberville's concern about DOD policy. I think it's wrong and probably does violate the law, but we can't let every grievance shut down the promotion system. So I am ready to vote.
Why are Republicans running away from Tuberville? Because fighting abortion in the United States is a losing issue. While a handful of state legislatures have outlawed the practice outright, and even more have limited the practice, in every single state where voters have had the opportunity to speak to the issue directly, to actually vote on it, eliminating or restricting abortion has lost. Every single time. They've lost in Michigan, Ohio, Kansas. Kansas Kansas is as ruby red as Dorothy's slippers, and here Republicans lost. And if those states ring a bell, they should. These are the states, the battleground states, where control of the presidency and the Senate are normally decided. Tuberville's stance puts abortion front and center, and they don't want to talk about it. He's putting an idea they hate forward, not because they disagree, but because it's a political loser. He's putting it front and center in front of the American people when they want to talk about the economy, which Americans are upset about, and they want to talk about immigration. So Tuberville is alone. Even Mitch McConnell has distanced himself.
Your own fellow Republicans disagree with you here. Even Mitch McConnell says he does not agree with this tactic. So I guess I'm just confused. If there is that conversation with the White House, what would you achieve by talking to them if they stand by this policy, which they put in place after Roe versus Wade was overturned, and you say you don't like this policy? Where's the middle ground there?
Well, first of all, I don't work for any other senator. I work for the people of Alabama, and they got their own opinion, whether it's Democrat or Republican, Independent. It's my prerogative to put a hold on.
The Republicans have put forth a solution. Their solution is to forget unanimous consent. The Republican idea is to take each nominee one by one and have old-fashioned Supreme Court cabinet official style confirmation hearings around each of them. But Democrats say no to that for 3 reasons. One, it would take too much time. Senator Dick Durbin from the state of Illinois said, if we are asked to go through these nominees individually for promotions, we'll run out of calendar this year. Doing this would effectively run out the clock for the Senate at a time when Democrats are in control. And Republicans are only giving this idea tepid support because the next time they are in control of the Senate, they don't want this to happen to them. Next, Democrats say, and Republicans are silent, and silence is usually agreement, that this would create a slippery slope. Democrats argue that instead of voting on a slate of officers and getting back to the business of legislating, they would have to acquiesce to singular senators whenever it suited them. They don't want to set that precedent.
Near an entrance to the Pentagon, photos of the Joint Chiefs grace the wall. At least, the Joint Chiefs whose positions are full. Those 3 black boxes represent the officers supposed to lead the Army, Navy, and Marines. None have been confirmed by the Senate. But it's not just 3 military services. The Pentagon says 301 officers are waiting to be confirmed. Among them, the commanders of United States Space Command, Northern Command, and Cyber Command, and most of the senior commanders in the Pacific who deal with China, the Indo-Pacific Commander, and commanders of the Pacific Fleet, Pacific Air Forces, Pacific Submarine Forces, and Pacific Special Operations.
First up is Tommy Tuberville. And then who? Josh Hawley? Rand Paul? Ted Cruz? The list goes on and on. And finally, they don't want to change tried and true practices for Tommy Tuberville. Their thinking is simple. He's a Republican. He's your problem. Don't ask us to change the rules to fix your problem. Why don't you fix your problem? In addition, this has real-world consequences. The 3 secretaries of the Army, Navy, and Air Force, Frank Kendall, Carlos Del Toro, and Christine Wormuth, wrote a joint op-ed piece in the Washington Post. Please note that the secretaries of these branches of the armed forces are not in the military. Rather, they are the civilian leadership atop each of the branches. They argue that Senator Tuberville is doing real damage to the military. Besides the vacancies at the helms of the Army, Navy, and Marine Corps, the 300 additional vacancies are exacting a large toll on these officers and their families who are in limbo. Namely, it is causing them to have to do double duty because these officers cannot get replacements for their current positions, and they also have to fill their new positions as acting officers. They, in essence, have to do 2 big jobs at the same time. That takes its toll. Furthermore, being a military officer isn't a remote job. You have to be there. That means these officers have to travel, maintain 2 residences, often between distant locations, to do their jobs in multiple places. That puts their wives and families in very tough positions as they cannot make housing decisions and their children cannot make stable enrollment decisions when it comes to school. Furthermore, getting senatorial confirmation to a job isn't some rubber stamp. While doing a job as an acting official is a band-aid on the problem, it is not a permanent solution. There are real-world legal limits as to what an acting officer can do versus a confirmed full-fledged officer. There are statutory constraints on acting officers around hiring, firing, demotions, promotions, troop movements, material resource allocations, kill commands, detainment commands, and the like for acting officers versus confirmed officers. Furthermore, it's dangerous because these skilled, seasoned leaders are in demand, and this uncertainty can cause abrupt surprise retirements. And you can't really just advertise for a brigadier general with beyond top secret clearance and a specialty in surface warfare on LinkedIn. If these officers leave, they'll be very hard to replace. They also worry that in the long term, they are sowing the seeds of doubt in the minds of young officers. They fear that young officers may see Tuberville's stance as politicizing the military, which is something both parties have tacitly and explicitly agreed not to do, as it would be a terrible idea to have the country see the military as pro-Democrat or pro-Republican. They fear that if young officers see that, they'll look for other opportunities, causing a slowdown in the pipeline of future senior officers. Tuberville's holdup is about to come to a head. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mark Milley, is set to resign in October 2023. This year, his replacement, Charles Q. Brown Jr., needs Senate confirmation to replace him. If you don't know what the chairman of the Joint Chiefs does, he's basically the most senior military advisor to both the President, Homeland Security, and the National Security Council. He meets regularly with the military leaders of the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, and Space Force, and reports back directly to the President to advise him or her about military matters. He's basically the President's eyes and ears about what the military thinks about the threats to America and non-US military activity around the world. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs basically allows the President to hear an unfiltered view of what the military thinks from the men and women that actually run the military. This position is invaluable, and it's coming up for a vote. Chuck Schumer says he won't budge, and so does Tommy Tuberville. You ever wonder what happens when the unstoppable force meets the immovable object? Well, it looks like we may all be about to find out, and I'm not sure we're gonna like it. Hey, if you like this video, please like and subscribe. Also, please hit that notification button if you wanna know when they come out. I really love making these videos for you. You guys have been great. I love your comments. So please drop a comment or question below, and I'll do my best to answer it, okay? Please come back and take it easy.